A very good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Shikha Pathak. I am the Manager Awareness and Skill Building at CySec. Welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is a part of CySec series titled Samgacchadhwam. May we all progress together. The objective is to cover various cybersecurity topics and to provide conceptual overviews. Let's get started with some ground rules. All attendees of the webinar will be on mute by default. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. In case of any questions, please share them on the chat window and the speakers will respond post the presentation. We will be recording this entire webinar and we will be uploading it later on CySec's YouTube channel, so you can revisit it anytime later. This is the 34th webinar. The topic today is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. We are sure you will find this series of webinars very useful. Next year in January, we have a very interesting topic on threat modeling. We will be sharing the details of the same soon. In case you want to access the videos of our previous webinars, you can do so by visiting the CySec's YouTube channel. As usual, we will have an assessment after this webinar, which will be kept open for 60 minutes. The questions will be from topics which are already covered in this webinar. Those who get 7 or more than 7 marks out of 10 will be given a certificate of achievement. Those who are unable to take the assessment will be given a certificate of participation. At the end of the assessment, you will also be asked to provide feedback. Please provide your genuine feedback and be assured that it will have no bearing on your assessment. The link of the assessment will be shared in the question and answer chat session. Please note that this assessment is open only to those who have participated in this webinar. Let me now take this opportunity to introduce the speakers for today's webinar. We have with us Ms. Nilima Tople. She is the manager in the Cybersecurity and Strategic Services team of Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP. She has over 11 years of experience in providing cybersecurity and data privacy advisory services to clients, and her experience spans across areas such as US DoD's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, Common Control Framework, Vendor Risk Management, Privacy Assessments, and Information Security Management System. She is a certified CISSP OneTrust Privacy Management Professional with experience in managing and working with cross-cultural teams across location and industries. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us Mr. Geet Kukreja, who is an assistant manager in Cyber and Strategic Services team of Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP, with over 4 years of experience in providing cybersecurity and data privacy services. He has experience in providing advisory services to clients in the banking, financial services, insurance sector, IT sector, and digital customer space. Welcome, Geet and Nilima. Now over to you for the rest of the presentation. I will be giving you presenter rights.
Thank you, Shikha, for this warm welcome note. Good evening, everyone on this call, all the participants. And I would like to thank you all for joining today's webinar on CMMC. This is truly a great pleasure for us to present at CySec's platform and be a presenter at Samgacchadhwam webinar series, where various professionals get opportunity to come and present their point of view on different industry-related hot topics. So before we start today's presentation, let me share my screen. And in the meanwhile, Geet, would you like to say a few words to all our participants?
Sure, Nilima. Hey guys, good evening. I hope everyone's staying positive and testing negative. We would really like to thank the CySec team for giving us the opportunity to conduct this webinar on cybersecurity maturity model certification. Lima, you can go ahead with your slide.
Sure. I think my screen is visible to all.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, all right. So in today's webinar, we are going to cover the conceptual information about this new US Department of Defense CMMC compliance requirement. We will be giving some background about it, what this particular certification is, who it is applicable to, what are the certification approach that an organization can take if they identify that they have to go for this particular certification, and how they can identify whether they are required to go for it or not. So such information we would be covering in today's webinar. But before discussing all these points, I would like to throw some light on why the CMMC came into existence. What was the main driving force behind it, which caused the release of such a stringent framework model? So we need to go back a year or two. So in year 2019, there was an audit conducted by United States Department of Defense for their 10 prime contractors. So they basically wanted to determine whether their DoD contractors have implemented adequate security controls in their systems and networks so that DoD's CUI data. CUI stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. So that is unclassified information. So all these terms might be new for many participants. We will be covering it in detail. But for a summary, let me just briefly cover it up. What was the objective of this particular audit and what was the focus of this audit? So this audit was conducted by DoD, and they wanted to ensure that their controlled unclassified information is secured in their contractors' systems and networks. So once this audit was conducted, 10 contractors were assessed at that point of time. And there were total 12,075 contractors. Sample was taken for 26, but ultimately 10 contractors were assessed for this particular audit. So out of 26, remaining 16 were not assessed for various reasons, such as either the contract was expired with DoD or their contract did not cover the CUI data, or the contractors maintained the CUI on US government's furnished network and systems. So they were not liable to have the security controls in place. So total 10 contractors were assessed against this audit, and the results were astonishing. And so the two main things which came into picture was the self-assessment approach, which was followed by those DoD contractors, was not working well. They did not have the proper controls in place. 9 out of 10 contractors did not have this control in place, and CUI protection was not adequate. So after seeing this audit results, what DoD did, they released this new stringent framework called CMMC, which has more stringent security requirements as defined earlier for NIST or any other framework. So we will go into detail about what this CMMC is. So for that, I would request Geet to take over this particular presentation. Geet, over to you.
Glancing over the agenda that we've chalked out. The topics on CMMC overview, the importance and advantages of CMMC, categories of control information that's termed as key, and comprising of domain, processes, and practices. We'll be showcasing a few examples of these processes and practices and one to five, and also few steps to certification. We offer resolving any queries concerns now. That we already use.
Shikha, sorry to interrupt, Geet. Shikha, I think there is some network issue at Geet's side. So voice is breaking. Is it the problem only with me or others are also facing the same issue? I think on chat window, people are saying the similar problem. Geet, can you try starting once again? I think there was a network issue at your end.
Let me do that.
Just try once, otherwise I'll take over and then you can continue rest of the slide. I think Shikha, I should continue this presentation. There is some network issue. Is it fine with you? It looks like Geet is muted again. All right, so in the interest of time, since Geet is not able to connect properly, Geet will try disconnecting and connecting again. Let me continue with this presentation till he's back. So in today's presentation, the points which we are covering is the overall overview of the CMMC certification, various importance and advantages of having this certification, and then the different types of CUI data controlled unclassified information that is in scope for this particular CMMC certification requirement. What is the framework defined by DoD that we are going to see in detail and understand how all the controls and domains are interrelated with each other. We will take few examples of those controls, which is defined at various different levels, level 1 to 5 of this CMMC requirement. And if any organization wants to go for this particular certification, what steps they can take in order to achieve this particular requirement. All right, so this CMMC certification overview, the brief history, why it came into existence, I have already provided. Here in this particular slide, what we are saying is this particular CMMC certification came into existence on January 2020. Department of Defense released after seeing the audits which were performed for 10 prime DoD contractors in 2019. And then this particular stringent compliance came into existence on January 2020, and it is mainly based on DFARS 25220470112. It is Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, and what it requires is it requires DoD contractors to safeguard their controlled unclassified information and put all the required controls in place so that the data which is there, which is government data, it is not compromised by any of the attackers, or it is not vulnerable and it is not kept in vulnerable systems. So all such requirements were earlier defined in DFARS and which was later on used. Not only DFARS, many other regulations were also referred for creating the CMMC. Other regulations which I say, it would be NIST 800, 171, NIST 853, and CERT, and many other regulations like 7 to 8 other regulations were there, which were referred to prepare the stringent requirement of CMMC. The overall intention of this CMMC is to provide a verification mechanism so that contractors can ensure that all the required cybersecurity practices and processes are implemented in their organization systems and networks. So that whenever governments use DoD's data, when I say data in CMMC's reference, it is CUI data. Whenever that data is either stored in their network or processed or transmitted, it is done securely. So that is the overall intention of having this particular certification. The DoD will ultimately be specifying this requirement CMMC level in the request for information and request for proposal documents, which is shared with their different contractors. What is CMMC? As I said, it is a mandatory US Department of Defense requirement, and it has like multiple maturity levels defined. So there are total 5 maturity levels defined, ranging from basic cybersecurity hygiene to advanced. We will see in detail in subsequent slides of what are those different 5 levels, how many domains, how many capabilities are there. I'm sorry, I think my screen presentation stopped.
I guess I'm back. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, Keith, I can hear you. We can continue from this slide. So I have covered just the background right now.
Geet, I have unmuted you now. Please check. There were some technical issues from Cisco's side.
All right. Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes,
you're
Keith. So you can
Right,
continue
so,
from point number 2.
Sure, I'll do that. Great. So, as in point number 2, we can start with saying that the CMMC model consists of 5 maturity levels, ranging from level 1 to level 5, comprising increasing requirements. And at each successful level, we have and at level 5, we have the most requirements, which is considered to be the most secure level. By 2025, all DoD contractors and subcontractors need to get CMMC certified, but the certificate level would vary depending on the data handled by them. To determine which CMMC level to comply with, the contractors and subcontractors need to inventorize their systems to know where exactly federal contract information, that's termed as FCI, and CUI data is stored. FCI can be defined as information provided by or generated for the government under contract, which is not intended for public release. This means that all the subcontractors and contractors do not have to obtain the level 5 certification, and the DoD specifies the required CMMC level to be certified on in the request for information and request for proposals. Now, it is important to understand that in order to provide services to the DoD, the organization needs to be CMMC certified. If an organization does not certify, the DoD will not issue a contract or a purchase order to that particular contractor or subcontractor. There are few implications of non-compliance to the CMMC regulation. The first one being criminal fraud, wherein it is a crime for organizations to lie about their CMMC assessment status. And number two, breach of contract, wherein non-compliant industry partners risk to be exposed legally through a civil breach for negligence in terms of maintaining specific cybersecurity controls during a business contract. To reiterate, CMMC consists of 5 levels of maturity with varying levels of adoption. In order to give a few examples, level 1 consists of 17 cybersecurity practices, while level 5 consists of 171 cybersecurity practices. The goal for CMMC is to be cost-effective and affordable for small businesses to implement at the lower CMMC levels by not hindering the security posture. Great. With this, we have come to the end of this slide and are good to proceed further. We are hoping that each one of you has a fair understanding about CMMC and are able to relate to the jargons that were used earlier. Well, in this slide, we'd be pressing on the need to comply with CMMC and also the advantages that come with it. We happened to browse the web and came across a statistical report published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in partnership with McAfee. The report plots the estimated average of cost of cybercrime, and as you can see it on the screen, the numbers are increasing at an alarming rate. As you see, in 2013, the cost was at $300 billion, and in just 7 years, it increased more than 3 times. That is $945 billion in 2020. The same report estimates that the world might lose more than $600 billion, or 1% of the global economy, to cybercrime annually. Moreover, the loss of QE from the defense industrial base, that is the DIB, poses a risk to the national economic security and in a broad sense to the national security. And hence, we have a model on cybersecurity to implement for trying our best in succeeding to not fall prey to cybercrime. Now, the green flower on the left bottom was kept to cover the white space, but it depicts common cybersecurity threats that organizations face, ranging from malware to SQL injections. And the diagram on the right bottom depicts the advantages that organizations might have on adopting CMMC in order to combat the cybersecurity threats. Let us look at these advantages at a granular level. Number 1, enhanced security posture and data management capabilities. Complying with the CMMC framework ensures that an organization deploys appropriate cybersecurity practices to eliminate conventional and emerging cyber threats. Besides, the model provides a practical working plan to ensure that business understands and updates its cybersecurity posture. Maintaining compliance with CMMC ensures that business keeps track of sensitive information they hold about customers and develop the capabilities to collect, retrieve, process, store, and transmit the information in a streamlined and secure way. Number 2, CMMC compliance enhances corporate culture. Any organization that collects and processes data from customers have a unique opportunity to boost their corporate culture through the adoption and management of cutting-edge measures that meet or exceed CMMC requirements. The process demonstrates the organization's leadership in information security and privacy. Number 3, qualify for government contracts. Indeed, the lack of CMMC certification disqualifies any businesses from participating in contracts that require it. Besides, apart from possibly becoming a federal-wide framework, the cybersecurity field might consider CMMC as part of the international standards, considering the stakeholders developed it are in line with the US allied cybersecurity standards. Number 4, corporate brand image. Investing resources to become CMMC certified showcases stakeholders that one's business is dedicated in protecting sensitive data and systems. Please note that the CMMC model is not limited to fight the threats shown in the figure, but a wide array of cybercrime. Well, with this, we have come to the end of this slide and can now move on to the next slide. Can we please move? Yeah, thank you. In this slide, we'll be covering what QI is and what are the different categories and subcategories of QI. By now, we know that QI stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. QI is information that the government creates or possesses, or that an entity creates or possesses for or on behalf of the government. CMMC is the regulation that requires an agency to handle this QI using safeguarding controls. A QI registry provides information on the specific categories and subcategories of information that the executive branch protects. The text in solid green boxes denote organizational group indexing, and the boxes in the bottom of each group index are the different QI categories. There are 20 organizational group indexes and 125 QI categories. Let us allow you guys to soak in the different organizational group indexes and QI categories, and in the meantime, I shall elaborate on few. The QI category on privacy information under the provisional group is the information referred to as personally identifiable information, that's termed as PII. PII embodies information that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity, either alone or when combined with other information that is linked or linkable to a specific individual. The QI category on general procurement and acquisition under the procurement and acquisition group is information relating to or associated with the acquisition and procurement of goods and services, including but not limited to cost or pricing data, contract information, indirect costs, and direct labor rates. The QI category on general proprietary business information under the proprietary business information group is the information relating to or associated with a company's products, business, or activities, including but not limited to financial information, data or statements, trade secrets, product research and development, existing and future product design, and performance specifications. The QI category on information systems vulnerability information under the critical infrastructure group is related to information that, if not protected, could result in adverse effects to information systems. Well, if we attempt on explaining all the categories, we'd be ruining your Christmas vacation, and we do not intend to do that. Hence, we shall now move on to the next topic. This slide covers the CMMC framework structure that consists of maturity processes and cybersecurity best practices from multiple cybersecurity standards, frameworks, and references, as well as inputs from the Defense Industrial Database, that is the DIB, and DoD stakeholders. Let us look at the figure at the top right. It depicts the CMMC model framework at a simplified hierarchical view. The model framework organizes these processes and practices into a set of domains and maps them across 5 levels. In order to provide additional structure, the framework also aligns the practices to a set of capabilities within each domain. Let us now focus on what the building blocks of the CMMC framework are. Domains. CMMC framework consists of 17 domains based on cybersecurity best practices and these domains are comprised of capabilities. Capabilities, these are comprised of practices which are mapped to CMMC level 1 through CMMC level 5. Practices and processes. Well, practices are activities performed at each level for the domain, whereas processes detail maturity of institutionalization for practices. I totally agree that all of these building blocks are interlinked. And in order to provide further clarity, we will now be enhancing our focus on the individual aspects of the CMMC framework. We hope that by now we'd be aware of the fact that we have 5 levels in the framework. Let us begin with the practices and processes defined at the various levels. Starting from the bottom, we have level 1, where the practices are developed for basic cyber hygiene. Level 1 focuses on the protection of FCI and consists only of practices that correspond to basic safeguarding requirements. Talking about processes, level 1 requires that an organization performs the specified practices. Because the organization may only be able to perform the specified practices in an ad hoc manner and may or may not rely on documentation, process maturity is not assessed. The practices are developed for intermediate cyber hygiene, and it serves as a progression from level 1 to level 3 and consists of a subset of the security requirements specified in NIST Special Publication 800-171 Revision 4, as well as practices from other standards and references. Because this level represents a transitional stage, a subset of practices references the protection of QUI. For level 2 processes, it is required that an organization establishes and documents practices and policies to guide the implementation of their CMMC efforts. The documentation of practices enables organizations to perform them in a repeatable manner. Organizations develop mature capabilities by documenting their process and then practicing them accordingly. At level 3, the practices are developed for good cyber hygiene and focuses on the protection of QUI and encompasses all of the security requirements specified in NIST Special Publication 800-171 Revision 4, as well as practices from other standards and references. For level 3 processes, it is required that an organization establishes, maintains, and resources a plan demonstrating the management of activities for practice implementation. The plan may include, but not limited to, information on missions, goals, project plans, resourcing, required training, and involvement of relevant stakeholders. At level 4, the practices are developed for being proactive and focuses on the protection of QUI from advanced persistent threats and encompasses a subset of enhanced security requirements from the draft version of NIST 800-171B Revision 6, as well as other cybersecurity best practices. These practices enhance the detection and response capabilities of an organization to address and adapt to changing tactics, techniques, and procedures used by APTs. For level 4 processes, it is required that an organization reviews and measures practices for effectiveness. In addition to measuring practices for effectiveness, organizations at this level are able to take corrective action when necessary and inform higher level management of status or issues on a recurring basis. At level 5, the practices are defined to be advanced and proactive, and it focuses on the protection of QUI from advanced persistent threats. The additional practices increase the depth and sophistication of cybersecurity capabilities. For level 5 processes, it is required for an organization to standardize and optimize process implementation across the environment. Well, with this, we've come to the end of this slide, and we feel that by now we've built the context and laid the structure of CMMC. I'll now be handing over the mic to Nilima, and she will be giving more insights on the framework by giving examples and pointing out key areas to consider for being CMMC ready. Over to you, Nilima.
Thank you, Geet, for this detailed information on how CMMC is structured. So by now, I think majority of our audience would be aware that the CMMC has focused on uncontrolled information, that is FCI and CUI data of Department of Defense, the government data. And whichever subcontractor or contractor of DoDs are either storing, processing, or transmitting this uncontrolled information, they need to go for this particular CMMC certification. So it is organization-wide certification. That is, any contractor has to identify whether they need to go for it, whether they want to do the business with DoD or not. And since the structure defines that there are 17 domains and different capabilities are mapped to these domains, and then we have practice and process controls. So let's see, Geet has very well defined in the previous slide. Like we have 17 domains, various capabilities defined, and different process and practice controls. So these controls are assessed against one of these levels. So which control will fall in which level, that is determined by what type of data is there to protect, whether it is a FCI data or CUI data. So if the FCI data is there in contractors system or network, they need to go for CMMC level 1 certification. If they have CUI data, then they need to go at the minimum level 3 certification and above. So that was the maturity level defined in the previous slide. Now we are seeing those 17 domains, how they are listed and what are the different capabilities which have been identified in this particular CMMC framework. So these are total 17 domains you can see in green boxes. And against each domain, we have different capabilities defined. So for example, we have access control domain, asset management, audit and accountability, awareness and training, configuration management, and many more, recovery, risk management. So anyone who is familiar with ISO 27001 standard, they would find it easy to understand these domains and what are the different capability requirement that is being mapped against each and every domain. So for example, in access control, what CMMC requires DoD contractors to have the capability built in their network is those contractors need to restrict the system access, and they need to have internal and system access control. They need to limit the data access only to the authorized users and different processes. Again, the asset, whichever is there, again related with that in-scope data, those needs to be identified and documented. Asset inventory needs to be maintained. Frequently, audit should be performed. Audit information needs to be identified and protected. Review and management of audit logs should be done for later point of review and then taking necessary actions. So these are pretty much similar to any other security related standard. If you refer the NIST standard or any other ISO 27001. Because this particular CMMC is built on multiple standards, as I said earlier, NIST SP 800 171 53 CSF, NIST CSF, then CIS controls. So you would find it familiar if you're aware of any of those standards. So without giving much time for this particular slide, Let me take example of access control domain and see how these capabilities are converted into practice and process controls. So this particular slide gives the example of level 1 to 5 controls. So these statements which you see are nothing but the respective access controls which is falling under different levels. So any organization who's having FCI data, they need to ensure this level 1 access control is implemented, not only this access control domain, but other 16 domain as well. So other 16 domain as well will have all these 5 levels defined for them. One main point to note here is level 1 process controls does not have any requirement to document whatever practices have been implemented. So in previous slide, we have seen different levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Geet has very nicely explained that at level 1, there is no requirement where we need to document processes. If the practices are implemented and if it is in a dark manner also, it will work. So that is what is mentioned here. There are no maturity processes assessed at this level. An organization performs level 1 practices but does not have process institutionalization requirement. And practices, so as I said, there are few capabilities under access control domain. So those capabilities were establishing system access request, controlling internal and remote system access, and limiting data access to authorized users and processes. So those 3 capabilities were defined under access control domain. And these are the practice controls which is required to be implemented on contractors network. So first one says at level 1 that information system access should be limited only to the authorized users and the type of function that authorized users are permitted to execute. We also need to verify and control the limit or connections to and use of external information system. So if there is any external system is trying to connect to your corporate network, that should be identified and limited. So that the data which is there lying in your intranet or in your corporate network. So here in CMMC's case, we are focusing on FCI and CUI data. So that is not given access to external information system if it is not required to. So first is like access should be provided only to authorized users and the authorized actions should be performed. And then we need to limit the connections between corporate system and the external systems. Third point is controlling information on publicly accessible information systems. Again, whatever information is published on internet by the subcontractor or contractor, DoD's contractor, they need to ensure whatever data is published, it is not falling under this uncontrolled information category. It is reviewed before publishing it on the on that public portal. And the person who's publishing that data is also identified, and what has been published by him should also be reviewed at a certain point of time. Again, at process level, level 2, CMMC requires organization to have access control policy in place. It wants organization to document CMMC practices. When I say CMMC practices, it's nothing but all these controls which we see. So all these controls should be documented. These are just examples. You might see many more level 2, 3 controls in the actual website if you go. So we have just picked few examples over here. So level 2 process requirement says that all the CMMC practices should be implemented and documented. Level 3, let's cover the policy processes first. So level 3 is asking us to establish, maintain, and resource a plan in which will include access control. So here we would ensure that we provide some certain budget to identify the resources who would be working to implement these controls, identify the budget to provide the training to those professionals who would be actually working for these controls. So all such things needs to be taken care in this particular control. Level 5 is about reviewing and measuring access control activities and effectiveness. So whatever access control activities we have identified and defined in these documents and implemented, those should be reviewed on a frequent basis and identified if we are lacking somewhere. If it is, that gap should be closed. And level 5 is like optimizing this entire approach. So we need to review, identify the gaps, and take the corrective actions. So that is what the level 5 is. So from level 1 to level 5, it is like incremental control, which goes up. So control requirement will be like stringent if we go from level 1 to level 5. In practices, level 2, we are asking like privacy and security notices should be provided. So whenever user logs into their system or any system admin or anyone who's trying to access the corporate network, they should be provided with a log-on banner on their system so that they're aware that they are logging into a system which is like which has the restricted access, and if they are not authorized, they should not be accessing it. So that kind of log-on banner should be provided. We should also be limiting the portable storage devices, whether it be USB or hard disk or any other external devices. So that restriction should be placed on the systems so that the data is not copied from your corporate systems to another unauthorized devices. If at all required for few systems, if this USB is required, that should be monitored and proper approval should be taken. So such controls are required to be implemented. Right. And then, of course, when we implement such control restrictions, least privilege principles should be employed for all these access related things. And non-privileged accounts will only be used for non-security functions. Another requirement is talking about limiting unsuccessful logon attempts. So if someone is trying to access the system multiple times and he's failing, so that type of attempts is considered a risk, a threat for the system. So we need to ensure that these unsuccessful logon attempts is restricted, let's say 3 attempts. And after that, the system should be locked for a certain period of time. Monitoring and control, we should be controlling and monitoring the remote access sessions. Whoever is trying to get the remote access to the systems should be monitored and provided only after approval. And the method should also be defined, like how they are going to access the system. Proper security controls should be in place, the VPN connection or other things, depending on from where they are accessing it. Level 3 control is talking about separation of duties for individuals. So maker-checker rule should be taken care of when this particular control is implemented. We should implement user sessions after after a defined condition is reached. Let's say idle timeout happens, or if we define a certain action which is getting triggered from a system, so that particular user session can be terminated. That totally depends on organization's requirement. Again, the wireless access should be protected with proper authentication and encryption. So not only the wired access, but the wireless access as well needs to be taken care, because it is quite possible that someone may try to get their wireless access point and try to connect it to the network to get the unauthorized access. So having proper authentication and encryption mechanism in place for the wireless access will again provide safeguard. And this will qualify for the level 3 certification. Control connection of mobile devices. So nowadays, the access to the corporate network is not only done from the corporate systems, but from various mobile devices from remote as well. We can connect to the corporate network, and so we need to ensure that all those connections are secured enough that it is not compromising any security related data, and it is not opening any vulnerabilities in the system which is being connected. So MDM policy can be implemented, MDM policy, and those mobile devices should be up to date with all the updates. And in case if the mobile device gets lost somewhere, then that remote wiping facility should also be available. So similar type of MDM policy requirement can be defined and then implemented. Employing cryptographic mechanisms and encrypting CUI data. So for this, CMMC recommends to follow list recommended cryptographic mechanisms. FIPS related cryptographic validation is required here. So details around all these controls can be seen in the CMMC document. The links we have provided at the end of this particular presentation. So anyone who's interested to go in detail of these requirements, how to implement what mechanism is specifically recommended by CMMC, it can be found on those links. So here I'm just covering at a very high level, and I'm trying to just relate how these are connected with each other: process, practices, domain, and capabilities, which are defined. Now at level 4 and 5, we are not only securing the CUI data, but we are providing the protection from advanced persistent threats. So the requirement which we need to ensure that it is implemented in our network are like control information should flow between security domains on connected systems. So here, what it means is any system which is having CUI data and another system which is not having CUI data. Now, both the systems need not be in the same corporate network. One can be outside as well, or both can be inside the corporate network. So we need to ensure, we need to first of all understand how the data is flowing from which system to another system, so that by mistake or intentionally someone doesn't get the access to CUI data. So all the information flow needs to be identified and protected accordingly. Periodic review and update of CUI program needs to be done for whatever access permissions have been given. Remote network access should be restricted based on organizations' defined risk factors, such as time of day, location of access, physical location of the current user, and roles. So all such requirements fall under level 4. In level 5, access control says that we need to identify and mitigate risks associated with unidentified wireless access points, which are connected to the network. So here, for example, we can have wireless IDS systems in place so that we ensure that no unidentified WAP devices are connected to the network, and they are not compromising the security of the network, and thereby we are securing uncontrolled information. With that, I think we can move to the next slide, which covers the high-level steps which can be followed by contractors if they are preparing for the CMMC certification. Here, I would like to say that any contractor, whether they are into business with DoD or if they are planning to go into business with DoD, they should immediately start working towards the certification, because this is one of the mandatory certification compliance requirement from US Department of Defense. If contractors do not have the certification, it means no business with DoD, US DoD. So the high-level steps which any organization can follow is, first of all, they should try and understand the scope. They should identify the scope, and for identifying the scope, they should understand what all systems in their network store, process, or transmits the FCI or CUI data. Once they have identified, okay, they are dealing with FCI. If they are dealing with only FCI data, then they can go for CMMC level 1 certification. But if they are dealing with CUI data as well, then they have to go for level 3 minimum certification. Once the scope is identified, they should refer the CMMC different level controls defined under different domains, 17 domains, which we have seen, and identify the applicable set of controls. So at every level, they have different level of set of controls. So level 1 has 17 controls, and it's incremental in nature. Total 171 controls will be there, practice controls will be there till level 5. So depending on which level they are going for certification, they have to identify the controls, design it, and then work towards its compliance. So the very next step is, once you identify the controls which is applicable to your organization, the gap assessment needs to be performed and documented. Whatever gaps are identified in different domains, whether access control, incident management, recovery, or auditing, those needs to be identified, documented, and recommendations provided. Next steps would come wherein all these gaps would be remediated. So it is recommended that all the gaps are remediated before any organization goes for the certification. So for this remediation, one quick approach is to document the system security plan for the systems which were in scope and which were identified with some gaps in some of the controls. So those SSP should be documented. It will cover the information about the system, how it is placed on the network, what services it provides, what ports and protocols are enabled for it. So all such details will be there, and the respective controls which are failing for it. And you can have a list of controls which is applicable for that particular system, and try to remediate all those gaps. Then comes the monitoring and reviewing of all the overall control posture for all the systems. Whatever gaps were identified, remediated. So monitoring and review should be performed. And the next step, plan of action and milestone is prepared just in case if there are certain observations which is going to take more time to address. There is a document called Plan of Action and Milestones can be created, which will consist of controls and measures that are required to be implemented, and how they are going to be implemented. Everything would be recorded in this U&M document. So as I said, it is recommended to close all the gaps before going for this third-party assessment, external assessment. So all the organizations who are going for the business with DoD, they need to go for this third-party assessment by C3PAO. CMMC, this stands for CMMC Third-Party Assessment Organizations. And this particular information about C3PAO can be found on the CMMC market share website. It is available on the internet. We have given the link in the next slide. So there is one accreditation body, CMMC AB, which basically approves and accredits CMMC third-party organizations, different organizations who are eligible to perform such assessments. So CMMC accreditation body has established a CMMC marketplace, and it is going to list approved C3PAOs and their relevant information. So different organizations can go to these marketplace, identify which C3PAOs they want to go for, select one of them, one of the approved and accredited C3PAOs, and schedule the CMMC assessment with them. So that is how the overall steps are defined if any organization wants to go for this particular certification. With that, we come to the end of this presentation. So quickly, we can summarize what we have seen during this presentation is, first of all, we understood why this CMC release was done. It was because of the audit that happened in 2019 by DoD for prime contractors and certain observations which were there. Then this stringent CMC framework was released by Department of Defense. And main intent of this certification is this framework is to protect FCI and CUI data during the acquisition and sustainment of product and services from DIB, that is Defense Industrial Base. This particular framework consists of 5 maturity processes, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 171 cybersecurity best practices, which progresses across 5 maturity levels. Now, this CMC maturity process institutionalizes cybersecurity activities and ensures that they are consistent, repeatable, and of high quality. And these practices provide a range of mitigations across different levels, starting from the basic safeguard at level 1 and then going up till level 3, where CUI, controlled unclassified information, is protected. And at level 4 and 5, we not only protect the CUI, but we also reduce the risk of advanced persistent threats. And then this particular CMC framework is coupled with a certification program to verify the implementation of those practice and process controls. And it is done by this C3POW organizations, which help any organization to get assessed against the certification and qualify for it. These are some of the official links where participants can go and get more details about the CMMC certification and what this model consists of, whatever information we have seen in the slide. Everything is available on these links. This is the link for the marketplace where you can go and check for C3POW approved vendors and some external assessors as well. All right, so with that, I open this platform for further question answer round.
Let me
thank
first.
you so much.
Sorry, Shika,
Please
go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, sure, thank you. So, Nilima, I was just going through the questions that came in by the chat window. And the first question is whether CMMC is given to an individual or an organization. And in order to answer that, CMMC is not given to an individual, but an organization that wishes to provide services to the Department of Defense. Do you want to add anything, Nilima, to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay. The second question is, what exactly is controlled unclassified information, that is CUI? Well, to answer that, CUI is information that the government creates or possesses, or that an entity creates or possesses for or on behalf of the government.
Yeah, so for your reference, I have presented the slide again. So if anyone has question, they can refer this particular slide, and they can, for more detailed information of a particular CUI data, what they can do, they can refer this CUI archive link, and they can get the details around this different UI categories. Yes, please.
Great. So the next question is, how frequently it will be reviewed in level 4? Well, once an organization gets certified by accreditation body, that's a C3POW, the certification is valid for 3 years. So I guess the frequency question is answered by that. The certification stands for a period of 3 years. The next question is on who is the certification body for CMMC levels? Well, the certification body is a C3 POW, which is a. Can you please go to that slide, Nilima? Yes, it is a CMMC third-party assessment organization that is approved and accredited by a CMMC accreditation body. So the accreditation body approves and accredits these organizations and places the list on the marketplace where the contractors and subcontractors who wish to do business with the DoD are requested to go to the site and pick out the most convenient 3POW as per their need. The next question is, when the control requirement is to encrypt QI, encryption at what level is expected? Transit, process, and at rest? Well, the more higher level you go on CMMC, it is mandated to encrypt QI at all levels, as well as transit and process and at rest. Is there anything that you want to add, Nilima, to this?
So for this particular question, if the participants wants to know what level out of like 1 to 5, so there is different requirement given, like in level 4 or some other here level 3. So if we refer this particular control description in their website, we will be seeing that NIST FIPS related cryptographic encryption is what that is recommended. So all the details, if anyone wants to look for how to go for it, that is available in that website. Yes, Keith.
All right. Thank you, Nilima. The next question is, log management and log analysis are important activities in information security. This aspect is covered in which level of CMMC? Well, the log management controls, practices, and processes are defined under the audit and accountability domain of the models framework. And if we are looking into the levels, the practices start from level 2 and they extend up to level 5. I hope that answers the question. And moving to the next question, whether the certification is a global certification. I would be needing more clarity on what the question is. Let me move to the next question, which is there any expiry duration for CMMC, or is it just a one-time certification? Well, like I mentioned earlier, the CMMC certificate is valid for 3 years. So after a period of 3 years, the subcontractor or the contractor needs to be assessed again. Perfect. The next question is, what criteria decides that a contractor has to satisfy a particular level of maturity? Well, the DoD will specify the required CMMC level that is to be achieved and certified on in the request for information and the request for proposal. So post that, an organization can then decide on what exactly the certification that is required by DoD. But in the meantime, they can inventorize their systems to understand the placement of the FCI and the QI data. Is there anything that you want to add, Nilima, to this particular question?
No, Keith.
Great. The next question is, can you please paste links on the chat window? Shika, can we do that?
Sure. Yeah, you can share links on the chat window. You can also check the questions, Geet, on the WhatsApp group. I have posted all the questions which are there in the chat window. Maybe it will be easier for you to scroll on the WhatsApp group.
Great. All right. So the other question is examples for QI. Well, Nilima, can you please go back to the slide on categories of QI data? So like I mentioned, the solid green boxes are organizational group indexes, and the boxes below are the QI categories. So let's take an example of the privacy organization group, and the QI categories are the contract use, the death records, the general privacy information, the genetic information that is classified as to be very sensitive, along with various other information like health, military records, student records, employee records, and personal records. This the entire category of QI can be found out in the link which is provided in the below in the footer note, and I that will also be shared with you. So the next question is: consider an organization XYZ have CMMC and they do business with India. So can the organization do business with other countries? I'm not sure that I understood this question well. So let me move on to the next one. What is DoD yearly contract value? How much? How many Indian companies bid? I don't think I'll be able to answer that question. Nilima, do you think can you answer that question?
No, I think we'll have to visit this DoD site if any information is available. So, intent of this particular webinar was to provide a conceptual overview of CMMC certification and the requirements that an organization who's going for the certification needs to take care of. So, all such details would not be available with us.
Yes. So this is a very interesting question which was asked. The
Yeah.
question goes: if companies already 27,001 certified, then what is the practical applicability of this certification from Indian companies context? Well, the DoD has clearly mentioned that in order to do business with them, in order to for them to issue a purchase order with the companies in India or such global companies, they need to have the CMMC certification, because the CMMC body, that is the CMMC AB, the accreditation body, will choose the C3 POW, that is the CMMC third party organization, and only those parties will be auditing and reviewing the controls implemented at the company. So in the case of ISO, a C3 POW does not satisfy as a C3 POW. I hope that answers the question. The next question is zero trust model supported by level 5 of CMMC? Nilima, do you want to answer that?
You can go ahead, Keith.
All right. So the levels that the practices that are defined at level 5 are 171 practices. And let's say at the point in time when a C3 POW audits it, and the organization does not find any flaw, and the organization gives a go ahead, then it is considered to be CMMC certified. But let's say that the cybersecurity threat has now enhanced, and it is not covering the purview. Well, in that case, even the GOD will not be able to help in case of a very mature cybersecurity attack. But the level 5 does considered to be the level which is proactive. So if it is not foreseen the cybersecurity attack, then it is something that should be considered. So the last question which I see is, if CUI is controlled unclassified information, uh, if it is critical sensitive, why is it called unclassified in that case? Uh, Nilima, do you want to answer that?
So there are two types of information that we can see. One is classified and one is unclassified. So here, this unclassified information is mainly going into the supply chain of this DoD's business. And DoD wanted to ensure that this particular information is also secured. And since it was not covered earlier, so this particular categories were defined and respective security controls were also identified. And then that is why the CMMC came into picture, although we had NIST and other regulations in place. But there was something which was lacking in the entire supply chain of DoD contract and their contractors' business. So that is why this particular thing came into the picture.
So we've got another question, Nilima. That is BCP not part of CMMC? CMMC does have domain and recovery that talks about the information security continuity. So it is covered as part of CMMC.
Right. Thank you, Geet. I think we have covered all questions that were there in the chat window.
Yes, we have.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Geet and Nilima. I'm sure this that the attendees would have found this as a very insightful and interesting session. More so, thank you for taking up all the questions and answers so patiently. With this, we come to the end of this webinar. Now I will be sharing the assessment for all the attendees. I will be sharing the assessment link on the chat window. Thanks a lot once again, Geet and Nilima, for hosting today's session and sharing your knowledge with everyone.
Thank you, Shikha, for this opportunity. It was really nice experience to be part of this particular Samgacchadhwam webinar series. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.
Thanks and have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye. So we will be disconnecting then.
Thank you, Geet. Thanks, Nilima.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All the best for the assessment, guys.
For the attendees, I will now be sharing the link for the assessment. As you know, we have kept the marks at 7. So those of you who will be securing minimum 7 or more than 7 will be getting the certificate of achievement. So I'll now be sharing the link. So once